Hello, I'm excited to start a new read aloud with you. It's called Chasing Vermeer. It was recommended by Mr. Emery, and I started reading it the other day, and I've decided I do want to read this with you. When a book of unexplainable occurrences brings Petra, Endodel, and Calder Pillay together, strange things start to happen. Seemingly unrelated events connect. An eccentric old woman seeks their company, and an invaluable Vermeer painting disappears. Before they know it, the two find themselves at the center of an international art scandal where no one, neighbors, parents, teachers, is spared from suspicion. As Petra and Calder are drawn clue by clue into a mysterious labyrinth, they must draw on their powers of intuition, their problem solving skills, and their knowledge of Vermeer. Can they decipher a crime that has left even the FBI baffled? And this is by Blue Balliet, illustrated by Brett Hellquist. And I'm going to be trying to share a few pictures in a moment of illustrations from the book, but I might not be as quick or as good at that as I would like to be as I start to present. So I will start to put some of the images into Google Classroom, including this very first one at the beginning of the book, and it says Chasing Vermeer Map Key. So I'll make sure that that gets loaded. And there's a lot of things that you're going to need to know. Let me see if I can get this first one up. The one character has an obsession with pentominoes, and so I wanted to make sure you have that in your head right now. So, and this is the very first beginning of the story, says, about pentominoes and about this story. A set of pentominoes is a mathematical tool consisting of 12 pieces. Each piece is made up of 5 squares that share at least one side. Pentominoes are used by mathematicians around the world to explore ideas about geometry and numbers. The set looks like this. And I have in front of me in the book exactly what you're looking at in front of you. There's FILNPTUVWXYZ. Pentominoes are named after the letters of the alphabet, although they don't all look exactly like their names. With a little practice, they can be used as puzzle pieces and put together into thousands of different rectangles of many sizes and shapes. This book begins like a set of pentominoes with separate pieces. Eventually, they will all come together. Don't be fooled by ideas that seem, at first, to fit easily. Don't be fooled by ideas that don't seem to fit at all. Pentominoes, like people, can surprise you. And it says, about the artwork, a challenge to the reader. This is why you're going to need the picture. So I'll send you some of these after I read. So it says, about the artwork, a challenge to the reader. And I'm going to close that. If you look carefully at Brett Hellquist's chapter illustrations, you'll find a hidden message. It is related to the pentomino code in the book, but not presented in exactly the same form. A certain living creature plays a part in deciphering this code, and pieces of the message appear in the artwork at regular intervals that create a pattern within the book. Here's a hint. This pattern is even, but odd. It has as many pieces as a set of pentominoes. And there is a way to get an answer at the end of the book. Chapter 1. 3 deliveries. On a warm October night in Chicago, 3 deliveries were made in the same neighborhood. A plump tangerine moon had just risen over Lake Michigan. The doorbell had been rung at each place, and an envelope left propped outside. Each front door was open onto an empty street. Each of the 3 people who lived in those homes lived alone, and each had a hard time falling asleep that night. The same letter went out to all 3. Dear friend, I would like your help in identifying a crime that is now centuries old. This crime has wronged one of the world's greatest painters. As those in positions of authority are not brave enough to correct this error, I have taken it upon myself to reveal the truth. I have chosen you because of your discriminating eye, your intelligence, and your ability to think outside of convention. If you wish to help me, you will be amply rewarded for any risk you take. You may not show this letter to anyone. or other people in the world have received, you may not show this letter to anyone. 2 other people in the world have received this document tonight. Although you may never meet, the 3 of you will work together in ways none of us can predict. If you show this to the authorities, you will most certainly be placing your life in danger. You will know how to respond. I congratulate you on your pursuit of justice. The letter was not signed, and it had no return address. The man had sat down to a late dinner. He liked to read when he ate, and he was on page 4 of a new novel. Book in hand, he answered the door. His spaghetti and meatballs were cold by the time he remembered them. He sat at the table for a long time, looking first at the letter and then at the moon. Was this a joke? Who would go to the trouble of writing and sending such a letter? It was printed on expensive stationery, the kind you buy if you want to be impressed or pretentious. Maybe he should feel flattered. Suspicious? What did this person want from him? What kind of reward were they talking about? And who was it who knew him well enough to know he would say yes? A woman tossed and turned in bed, her long hair trapping moonlight against the pillow. She was going over a list of names in her mind. The more she thought, the more agitated she became. She was not amused. Could this be a coincidence, or was it a clever warning? What exactly did this person know about her past? She finally got up. A cup of hot milk could calm her nerves. She moved carefully in the dark, using the watery rectangles of light that fell across the floor. She wasn't about to turn on the kitchen light. The names scrolled in tidy columns in her mind, each group belonging to a different chapter in her life. There was Milan, there was New York, there was Istanbul. But this was an invitation, not a threat. If things got strange or frightening, she could always change her mind. Or could she? Another woman lay awake under the moon, listening to the wind and the occasional whine of a police siren. This was one of the weirdest coincidences ever. Was this letter insane or inspired? And was she just being gullible, thinking this person really was writing to her? Or maybe hundreds of these letters had gone out. Had her name been picked out of a phone book? Fake or not, the letter was intriguing. A centuries-old crime? What could this person be planning? And what about the spooky part? If you show this to the authorities, you will most certainly be placing your life in danger. Maybe this was a maniac, one of those serial killers. She pictured the police going through her apartment and finding the letter, standing over her body and saying, "Gee, she should have called us first thing. She could have been alive today." A lone cat yelled in the alley below her bedroom, and she jumped, her heart pounding. Sitting up in bed, she shut the window and locked it. How could she not say yes? This was a letter that could alter history. Chapter 2. The letter is dead. It was a strange thing for a teacher to say. By the 6th week of 6th grade, Mrs. Hussey wasn't a disappointment. She had announced on the first day of school that she had no idea what they were going to work on that year or how. It depends on what we get interested in or what gets interested in us, she added, as if that was obvious. Calder Pillay was all ears. He had never heard a teacher admit that she didn't know what she was doing. Even better, she was excited about it. Mrs. Hussey's classroom was in the middle of the school building in the university school, in the neighborhood known as Hyde Park. The school sat on the edge of the University of Chicago's campus. John Dewey, an unusual professor, had started it centuries earlier as an experiment. Dewey believed in doing, in working on relevant projects in order to learn how to think. Calder had always liked the man's appropriate name. Not all teachers at the U, as they called it, still agreed with Dewey's idea, but Mrs. Hussey obviously did. They began the year by arguing whether writing was the most accurate way to communicate. Petra and Deli, who loved to write, said it was. Kids like Calder, who hated it, said it wasn't. And what about numbers? What about pictures? What about plain old talking? Mrs. Hussey had told them to investigate. They took piles of books out of the library. They found out about cave art in France, about papyrus scrolls in Egypt, about Mayan petroglyphics in Mexico, about stone tablets from the Middle East. They tried things. They made stamps out of raw potatoes and covered the walls with symbols. They invented a sign language for hands and feet. They communicated for one whole day using nothing but drawings. Now it was almost mid-October. Would they ever study regular subjects like the other classes did? Calder didn't really care. What they were doing was real exploration, real thinking, not just finding out about a bunch of dead, famous grown-ups, what they believed. Mrs. Hussey was cool. DEAD, she had written on the board. They were talking about letters that morning because Calder had groaned about having to write a thank you note and said it was always a waste of time. No one cared what you put in a letter. Then Mrs. Hussey asked if anyone in the class had ever received a truly extraordinary letter. No one had. Mrs. Hussey looked very interested. They ended up with a strange assignment. Let's see what we can find, Mrs. Hussey began. Ask an adult to tell you about a letter they will never forget. I am talking about a piece of mail that changed their life. How old were they when they got it? Where were they when they opened it? Do they still have it? Petra, like Calder, was fascinated by their new teacher. She loved Mrs. Hussey's questions and about her and her long ponytail and the 3 rings in each ear. One earring had a small pearl dangling from a moon, another a high-heeled shoes the size of a grain of rice, and another was a tiny key. Petra loved how Miss Hussey listened carefully to the kids' ideas and didn't care about right and wrong answers. She was honest and unpredictable. She was close to perfect. Mrs. Hussey suddenly clapped her hands, making Petra jump and setting the little pearl earring into orbit. I know. Once you find a letter that changed a life, sit down and write me a letter. Write me a letter I won't be able to forget. Petra's mind was already racing. Calder pulled a pentomino piece out of his pocket. It was an L. He grinned. L for letter. This letter was definitely not dead. L was one of the most simplest pentomino's shapes to use. Most letters, the kind you mailed, were rectangles. He realized, just like an accurately put together pentomino solution. L was also the 12th letter in the alphabet and one of the 12 pentominos. And today was the 12th day of October. Calder's grandmother had once told him that he breathed patterns the way that people breathed air. Calder sighed. If only thoughts didn't have to be broken down into words. Too much talk was hard to listen to, and writing for him was a brutal process. So much got left behind. Mrs. Hussey ended the class by saying, "Got it? First find, then do. Who knows where this will take us?"